Okay, we will call the meeting to order. And Claire, may we have a roll call, please?
Fuller,
Here.
Lomo,
Here.
Littman,
Here.
Ashkenazi,
Here.
Kimura,
Here.
DeGenero,
Here.
Kaplan, Lineski,
Here.
Puglielli, Aromatica, Chairwoman Beal,
Here. Okay, we can stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The notice requirements of the Ocean Public Meeting Law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township Clerk on July 21st, 2023. There is an emergency exit through the courtroom doors and 2 exits at the rear of the room. There will be no smoking, no new cases will be started after 10 o'clock p.m., and no new testimony taken after 10:30 p.m. In addition, the applicant will be limited to 45 minutes of testimony. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean's Community Cable Channel, Channel 22 on Verizon Fios, and Channel 77 on Cablevision. All cell phones must be turned off, or if you need to make a call, please make your call outside the meeting room. We have 3 resolutions for memorialization. Michael Corley, Block 37.09, Lot 4, 4 Windsor Lane, Ocean. Daniel and Michelle Mizrahi, Block 25.11, Lot 1, 200 Ampere Avenue, Oakhurst. Ezra and Adele Tawil, Jeanette Tawil, and David Batesh, Block 25.34, Lot 14, 445 Brookside Avenue, Oakhurst. And
Resolutions? I'll second.
Fuller,
Yes.
Littman,
Yes.
Ashkenazi,
Yes.
Kimura,
Yes.
DeGenero,
Yes.
Lineski,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Beal.
Yes. The following cases will be carried to February 15th, 2024, to be held in the Public Meeting Room, Municipal Building, Deal in Monmouth Roads, Oakhurst. Ashkenazi, Block 11.01, Lot 3, 1036 Norwood Avenue, West Deal. Michael Gioseffi, Block 159, Lot 43, 78 Cold Indian Spring Road, Ocean. Memo Investments, LLC, Block 7, Lot 5144 Monmouth Road, C1. Matthew and Gloria Ingber, Block 9, Lot 46, 257 Dixon Avenue in Ocean. Cam Khan, Block 123, Lot 2, 1302 South Wanamassa Drive, R6. And no additional notice, correct? No additional notice. Okay, and our first case tonight, Timothy Appert, Block 37, Lot 28, 13 Tilton Drive, Ocean, R2. Applicant seeks approval to construct a front portico. Minimum front yard setback 35 feet required, 32.4 feet proposed. Is the applicant present? Yes, please come forward and you may have a seat at the table. And if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes.
Okay, you can have a seat. And I will turn it over to our, we need to mark the packet, Claire, thank you. And I will turn it over to our experts, Mr. Higgins and Mr. Matlack.
And I am disqualified on this because I'm within 200 feet of the property.
Okay. Mr. Matlack.
So you'll just be hearing from me tonight for this one. So the applicant is requesting approval for the installation of a portico over the existing porch in the front yard. Very briefly, that is the entire application. I do have to make a correction in my report. My report indicates that the required front yard setback is 45 feet, which is the required front setback in the R3 zone, but this is the R3 cluster zone, which is not shown on the tax map, but was confirmed by the zoning officer. So the front setback is actually 35 feet required, and they are proposing 32 feet. So it's not as egregious of a variance as if it was just the R3 zone. That is the only variance required, and I don't really see it as a major issue. It just results in the vertical expansion of the existing nonconformity of the front porch, and we can hear the applicant provide some testimony for the reasoning for installation of the portico.
Okay. Ms. Appert, if you can tell us about your request.
Yeah, this is part of a larger remodel on our home where we have to redo our roof and our siding, a couple skylights, new front door. So it's just really about, so when people come to the door, they have some coverage from the weather when you're outside in these kind of icy cold days. There's 10 other homes in our small development that have porticos of similar setback. I didn't go and measure anything, but you can tell just all the houses are pretty much the same in our block, and unfortunately, we're stuck with the location of our house.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
So you're just 2 feet off, right? No, 4 feet away.
2 feet. We need 2 feet 8 inches.
Yeah.
The pictures you provided in the application, those are neighbors that have similar properties or similar what you're looking to do?
Yes. Yes.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, any questions from the public? Okay, motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Fuller,
Yes.
Palumbo,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Ashkenazi,
Yes.
Kimura,
Yes.
Dejanero,
Yes.
Linesky,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Dean.
Yes. Okay, and will someone offer?
Offer a positive resolution.
I'll second.
Fuller,
Yes.
Palumbo,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Ashkenazi,
Yes.
Kimura,
Yes.
Dejanero,
Yes.
Linesky,
Yes.
Chairwoman Dean.
Yes. Okay, best of luck, Mr. Appert.
Approved or wrote?
Yes, approved.
Great. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Fast as I can.
Next case, Robert and Marianne Bedford, Block 89, Lot 5, 15 North Ditmere Drive, Ocean, R5. The applicant proposes to construct a screened front porch within the front yard setback on North Ditmar Drive. Minimum front yard setback, 30 feet required, 22 and 3 feet. North Ditmere Drive proposed. Okay, and if you both can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes.
Okay, I will turn it over to Mr. Higgins and Mr. Matlack. And Claire, can we mark the packet?
Okay, I'll read my report. It's dated January 17th. The applicant is proposing to construct an addition to a single-family residence, including a one-story addition to it and a screened-in porch. The site is an irregularly shaped parcel which has an area of 9,405 square feet, 7,500 square feet is required, a width of approximately 100 feet, and it's not really dimensioned on the plan, so it's approximate. 75 feet is required, and a depth of 82.35 feet, which is, the ordinance defines the depth as the minimum distance between the street line and the rear lot line. 100 feet is required, and actually the depth varies from the 82.35 to a greater depth, but the ordinance calculation is 82.35. The following variance is necessary. Minimum front yard setback. The ordinance requires 30-foot front setback. The proposed porch is set back 22.2 feet. There's a hardship that exists due to the non-conforming lot depth of the site, where 100 feet is required and 82.35 feet exists. In addition, the recently adopted master plan recommends that front yard setback requirements for covered but open porches be relaxed. While this porch is screened and not open, it is not completely inconsistent with the master plan, particularly since there is a hardship due to the lot depth. Additional comments: the chart on the architectural plan is incorrect as to the calculations for building coverage. It incorrectly uses the total lot area, which is 9,405 square feet, instead of the buildable lot area, which is 75% of the total lot area, and that's 7,054 square feet. That chart should be corrected. This should be a condition of approval should the board approve the application. Similarly, the plot grading plan on file with the application is incorrect in that it does not show the proposed porch addition. While a revised plan was prepared by the engineer, it was not submitted properly to the planning board secretary by the applicant's representative and is not in the file, so it wasn't there for people to review. However, when I looked at it, the architect's plan does have a site plan that's accurate, so people could have reviewed that. The revised plan should be properly submitted to the planning board secretary, and any zoning chart on the revised plan should accurately reflect coverage calculations based on buildable lot area, as well as frontage width and depth calculations based on the ordinance definitions of those dimensions. This should be a condition of approval should the board approve the application.
Okay. Mr. Matlack?
My only comment was that there are proposed grades should be provided at all corners of the proposed structures. There are some grades provided, just not on all corners. This is just a minor thing to clean up the grading plan, and with Mr. Higgins' requirement that it be submitted, those revisions should be made as well.
Okay. And Mr. and Ms. Bedford, if you can tell us about your request.
Sure. So this is part of the screen in front porch is part of our bigger build. Like, we're building off to get more room for our house, and we're losing the view of our lake that we love because we can't see it from the backyard. And so we love our area, and we want to appreciate the lake that we live across the street from. And you know, there are times where we love being outside, but there's mosquitoes and geese and all that stuff, and so that's why we were looking to have a screen in front porch so that we could enjoy our area a little more throughout the entire season, versus just having it open and not a screen in porch. And so that's the main reason why we need the screen in front porch. It's just that, you know, we wanted to enjoy the season all year long.
And we're really involved with the pond. It's called Lollipop Pond. Bobby's part of, goes to all the commission meetings. We do a lot of cleanups around the pond, so it's really important to us to be able to really enjoy that. Any given day, there's about 50 geese on our lawn, so we want to have a space with our 5-year-old that we can really be outside, but not maybe in the 2 pounds per goose poop that happens every day. And we just, we love the area, so we want to be able to enjoy it outside.
Okay. Questions from board members? Questions from the public? Okay, motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close public hearing.
Fuller,
Yes.
Delomo,
Yes.
Lippman,
Yes.
Benazzi,
Yes.
Chamorro,
Yes.
DeGenero,
Yes.
Oneski,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Deal.
Yes. Okay, motion for
Can I
positive.
make a comment before you do the motion? Only 7 members can vote.
Okay,
Last time 8 members voted.
thank you.
So when one of the alternates can't vote, I don't know which alternate it would be. But
Okay. Will someone offer with the condition of the improved or revised chart, plot grading plan, and proposed grades? I believe that covered everything.
Do you have any questions about what they're asking you to supply?
We already have given in the grading plan because we had gotten that, but we'll have to talk to the architect about that, but I assume we can get more information once we know
Absolutely.
what needs to be
Right.
updated.
Yeah, I received a copy of the grading plan electronically, and I was able to look at it those my comments still stand with the plan that I received. I think just hard copies weren't properly submitted to the town.
Okay.
I'll offer a
And
positive
just
resolution.
the charts need to be corrected so that they're accurate. And I think what the engineer and the architect have to look at the ordinance and the definitions in the ordinance and make sure that their calculations are consistent with those definitions. Just so the applicants know, different zoning ordinance all have different definitions in them. So
Is it
one
for
town
the
differs
grade-
from
sorry.
another.
Is it for the grading as well, or that's for the architectural?
The engineer would do the grading, I think, right?
Yeah. Both the grading plan and the architectural plan
But-
have to have the revised
Yeah.
zoning chart
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
corrected.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's in your report, right? Which they have access to.
Yes.
So you can send that. You can send that
Okay.
to your professionals.
Okay, great, thank
Yeah.
you.
And this isn't something that their architect is gonna do and suddenly they'll be in jeopardy of it's just fixing something to
Yeah,
deliver to.
correct.
So yeah, I'll offer a positive resolution contingent on the engineer getting what they need.
I have second.
Fuller,
Yes.
Delamo,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
Yes.
Kimura,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next case. First French speaking Baptist Church, Block 38, Lot 71 and 72, 2795, 2797 Asbury Avenue, Ocean, R2. Applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval to construct an approximately 14,096 square foot house of worship. The use is a conditional use in the zone. The applicant is requesting a conditional use approval where several bulk variances are also required. The attorney for the applicant is Amanda M. Curley. Welcome.
Good evening. On to the main show. So Amanda Curley from Dave Pitney on behalf of the applicant, the First French-Speaking Baptist Church. As stated very succinctly, we are seeking preliminary and final major site plan, a D3 variance, several bulk variances, and a design waiver to construct a house of worship on property located on Asbury Avenue. It's identified as lot 71 and 72 in block 38 on the township's tax maps, and the zoning is the R2 zone. It is a conditional use. The reason we need a D3 conditional use is that this property is triangular with 3 front yards and no rear yard. So we failed to meet one of the front yard setbacks to the rear along a paper street that is unimproved and not used, I do not believe. It's called Trudeau Lane. But because of its existence, that triggers the D3 relief. We meet the rest of the D3 standards, but for the front yard setback and then the lot depth, both are caused by the existence of the paper street. And for the front yard setback in that regard, it's because we have a maintenance shed to the rear for storage of snow removal equipment and other maintenance to keep the property clean and the grass cut. Otherwise, we meet the conditional use standards. I would like to note, too, that this is a house of worship, so it is an inherently beneficial use. It automatically satisfies any positive criteria because of that. It is a church. The municipal land use law has stated it's inherently beneficial, so I just want to put that out from the outset. The variants that we're going to be seeking, the bulk ones, are as follows. We need a variance to permit a change in grade exceeding the permitted maximum of 2 feet. We need a variance for the maximum permitted impervious coverage based upon the buildable lot area. We need a variance for the proposed location of the curb cut driveway. We actually met with the township. Initially, we had the curb cut in the middle of the property, and apparently there had been accidents, and they requested that we shift it to the western 1/3. So we're seeking relief, but that was a comment that was through your professionals that we were addressing. We also need a variance because our landscaping plan was not prepared by a licensed landscape architect, but an engineer. Another variance is required for a fence because we have this front yard setback and front yard condition where there's 3 front yards. So we have a fence that is higher than 3 feet in those yards, and it's solid, not see-through. Or it's probably a plain vinyl fence. We also need variance relief for landscape around the drainage basin, and then, if required, a design waiver for the proposed tree replacements and tree size, and we will happily give into the tree fund for that. We did notice for 2 lighting variances, we are going to seek to try to eliminate those. We're going to relocate a pole, so we're going to eliminate the relief for the setback of a light pole. And then Mr. Anderson, who's my engineer, we're going to try to eliminate the maximum minimum levels of illumination, but he has to do the calculation. So we'll get back to the next hearing on that one. We understand we are not getting done tonight. We have several witnesses. We have Paul Anderson, my engineer, Robert Dooley, our architect. We have Lee Klein, a traffic engineer, and we also have Paul Anderson coming back to provide the planning testimony because he's both a professional engineer and a licensed planner. So this evening, we're hoping to get through Mr. Anderson's testimony. I understand there's objector's attorney here as well. So with that, I would like to call my first witness, Paul Anderson.
Okay. You affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and can you tell us about your credentials, please?
Yes, my name is Paul W. Anderson. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. Started in 1983 when I got my Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Clarkson University. Been licensed as a professional engineer since 1988. I am the principal of Anderson's Consulting Services, and I prepared the plans for this evening. I've been accepted as an expert witness in front of numerous municipalities as an expert in engineering and planning, and my licenses are in current good standing for both engineering and planning. On the planning perspective, I passed the planner's examination approximately 14 years ago, and I have provided testimony throughout many towns in New Jersey.
Okay. Unless there's any objections, I think we will accept. Claire, can we mark the packet? And before we begin with any testimony, Mr. Higgins or Mr. Matlack, anything at the forefront that you would like to?
No, I think the applicant's attorney pretty much summarized my report. The only caution I would make is that I do have a disagreement with her with regard to whether or not the fact that the church is an inherently beneficial use goes towards the positive criteria, because the issue is not the use. The issue is it's a D3 variance where the applicant has to demonstrate that the site can accommodate the use despite the need for that variance. It's not really the use itself, because the use is a permitted use. It's just permitted subsequent to certain conditions. At the same time, I think you should understand that the use itself is protected under certain constitutional issues and I think so it's something you can give consideration to, but the fact that it's inherently beneficial is not dispositive of the special reasons for the granting of the variance.
Okay. And Mr. Matlack, anything at the forefront?
I think that the applicant's professionals are going to go through my report. I'll be looking to hear testimony about stormwater management, traffic, which they the engineer is going to speak, the traffic expert is going to speak. So I'll wait until we hear testimony to make some comments. I think that with regards to specifically stormwater management, I think that the plans may need some revisions. So I think that, as the applicant's attorney said, they may not be heard completely tonight. So that will provide an opportunity to possibly make plan revisions and address some of my comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to note that Mr. Gazarowski, the objector's attorney, did reach out to me, and we did say we would not finish this evening. So he would like an opportunity to present his own witness. That will be at a later date. In the interim, we do plan on submitting a traffic report. Our traffic engineer is working on that right now. He's not here tonight. So it is really our hope tonight to get through Mr. Anderson, and if we have time, perhaps start with Mr. Dooley, our architect, but we do not plan on ending tonight, and we will grant an extension for the board to act.
Okay. Begin.
Very good. Thank you. So I'd like to need to be near the mic, I guess.
Go right there. Behind it.
Yeah, I'm not going to stand. I had my knee replaced 5 weeks ago, so I'm
I
going
will
to sit down
stand.
if I can.
And I will mark.
And I can get up and around a little bit, but I'd rather not stand if you don't
It's
mind.
fine. And if we can,
We're going to mark this as A1.
A1, okay.
This is just an aerial of existing conditions.
That's correct. All right, so the property, block 38, lots 71 and 72, shown on the plan. Now looking at this, I can see in my office, but there's a red outline around the property that I'm trying to follow with my laser. And you have Asbury Avenue to the south, you have Truex Lane to the west, you have Sharon Drive to the east. The property has 274.7 feet of frontage on Asbury Avenue, and also the frontage on the Paper Street, which I would find it difficult to believe that it would ever be developed. There's houses on the other side with other access. Across Asbury Avenue is Neptune Township, so we're right on the municipal border. If you can't see on the exhibit A1, you can see in the plans that it is somewhat of a regular shape. You could call it a triangle. It's not really a triangle. It's very close to it. And what has been referred to as the multiple front yards, you have a front yard associated with the Paper Street here. You have a front yard associated with Asbury Avenue, and you are required by your ordinance to have a rear yard. So the rear yard would need to be one either of the east or western property lines. And then one of the conditions of the conditional use is that the lot depth is 200 feet. Now, the other definition is lot depth is the distance between your front yard and your rear yard. So since the lines touch, our lot depth is 0 on a 4.96 acre property. So that is just by definition, and by shape of the lot, and because of a paper street that is there. We have, the property is upland. There's no flood zone associated with the property. It does not have any wetlands or wetlands buffers based on the New Jersey GeoWeb. But in addition to that, we also had Environmental Technology Incorporated go out in 2020 and do a detailed site investigation. And we could enter this into evidence if you like. It just basically says that there's no wetlands or buffers, so there's no consideration for DEP approval for wetlands or floodplain associated with the property.
In lieu of an exhibit, we'll submit that with our next submission, with our traffic report.
Okay. So if we can go to A2, which is the next one, Amanda, thank you.
I did not have my knee replaced, so.
Yeah. Okay, so the applicant proposes a 14,096 square foot footprint house of worship, which is shown here in the tan color. It's served by a single access driveway to Asbury Avenue. And as was mentioned in the introduction, the driveway is not in the middle third because one of the meetings I had with the municipal engineer and planner indicated that there was a fatal accident on this roadway, and it was somewhat attributed to lack of sight distance when somebody's trying to pass. So I went back and I looked at the sight distance at the driveway where he proposed it in the middle of the property, and it met the design standard for the design speed, but it was right on the limit. So being that we had some room, I thought it was worthwhile to move it over here and balance out the sight distance in both directions, east and west on Asbury Avenue, and I think it offers a better solution to driveway location. There's no real impediment on the lot to the left or to the west in terms of any driveway coming out there, so it's not like we have one driveway right upon another. So I think this is a better solution. We could move it over a little bit, but I think this works very nicely, having the traffic go all the way in to the site with a straight shot.
And to confirm, this causes a variance.
That is correct. The location creates a variance, but it creates a safer driveway and access point to the site. So also shown on the site plan on this exhibit, and again, I'm sorry it doesn't really punch out as well as I would like, is I have turning radiuses for both the fire truck that is to come in and turn around the corner, straight in and turn the corner and to fight fires. And then we also have a turning radius for a garbage truck which turns going across the roadway in front to the dumpster enclosure, which is proposed on the eastern property line in the corner in this dark shaded color. Behind to the west of the building and to behind, and also east and to behind the building are parking spaces to serve the property. It has 228 parking spaces as proposed, 23 of which are EV spaces, which are up against the building on both sides. And the state code permits EV spaces to be counted 2 for 1, so that gives us a total count on parking of 251 parking spaces, where 251 are required for the facility of this size. We had looked, there was a comment discussing the need for a loading space. With this particular use, I don't believe that there is a need for a loading space on the project. We don't have any large deliveries. It's insignificant in terms of any trucks that would be delivering things to the site, or your FedEx, Amazon type vehicles which can easily get in, but they don't need a loading dock. Also, based on this use, which is primarily on Sundays and some other evening classes and things like that, the parking lot will be largely empty a lot of the time, and so deliveries during the day should not create any problems with other vehicles trying to get through, or or getting in the way of vehicles at all. So we believe it's appropriate to have no loading space and just allow them to park wherever is convenient to get in and deliver whatever package that they have. Let's see. All right, so if we can go to the next one, please. All right, so this will be, the second one is A2, so this will be A3. So A3 is a combination of the grading and utility and the landscape plan that I prepared for the project. And so what we see here is the project does have a stormwater management system. I'll deal with drainage first. We have 2 detention areas that are based on green technology. The first being a porous pavement system, which is shown in a light gray tone, and that absorbs water through the asphalt into a reservoir layer below, and then it allows it to absorb into the subsoil. Subsoils in here, based on testing done for previous applications, is a very permeable sand material that will allow the water to rapidly perk into the ground. When you have somewhat harder rainfalls, the storm inlets will allow a connection to that and also feed and store the water in that system. And that takes a portion to the east side of the parking lot and the porous pavement area itself. It meets the DEP standards for area of contributing area, and it'll meet the standards for the porosity of pavement and so forth. The second detention basin, or second stormwater management facility, is in the front. This is a small scale infiltration basin, all right, which is also green technology. It serves a drainage area of approximately 2.35 acres. And it collects water from the roof and from the western side of the parking lot, and the water comes in and absorbs into the ground. The entire 2-year storm will absorb into the ground, and we start getting some runoff on larger storms. And but overall, the combination of these two reduce the discharge from the site to the required standards for stormwater management, in terms of a 50% reduction, or 50% reduction for the 2-year, 70% for the 10-year, and 80% of existing rate for the 100-year storm. It's been designed for both the current storm and the year 2050 storm, the future storm. There is one comment that's appropriate. There's many comments appropriate in the engineer's report. Let me say it that way. But there is a 4-bay required that I'll have to, or some kind of pre-treatment that I'll have to add to before this discharges into the basin, and we'll have to clarify some things in our resubmission in terms of height of groundwater and things like that, and review that with him to show that we comply. Before I go there, okay, so we are going to be served by municipal water. We have a water line coming in on the western side, to the west of the driveway. Comes in and has the, I believe it's a hot box that is for the meter, and then it comes into the building. The building will be fully sprinklered. There's 2 hydrants proposed on site. We do not know where the fire connection would be, for the fire department to pressurize the sprinkler system. We'll figure that out with the local fire department and see where they would prefer it goes, and put it in that location. Again, that comes off of the system in Asbury Avenue. We also propose a municipal sanitary sewer system. It comes out the east side of the building and down to Asbury Avenue, and it runs along Asbury Avenue until it gets to Sharon, the intersection of Sharon. And at that point, we tie into a manhole that is there. It's a gravity flow system that will serve the building. All the improvements there is on Asbury Avenue. We have a plan showing all the widening of Asbury Avenue is a minor widening. There's also a dedication of property to the county to match the right-of-way width that the county desires. And we believe we've designed it to Monmouth County standards, but we have to make that submission and get their approval for all of the work that we're doing in the right-of-way of Asbury Avenue. If we move on to, I will just briefly talk about the lighting. Amanda had mentioned that we have a lighting plan associated with the project. There are a few lights that have to be relocated to meet the required setback from the property line. We intend to do that and eliminate that relief requirement. And I have to go through some calculations, as she mentioned, to verify that we meet the minimum to maximum ratios and other things that are required by your ordinance. We're a little bit off at this point. But I don't want to spend too much of the board's time discussing what we have on the plan now because it's going to change. So, and now we get to the landscaping. So, I used to have a landscape architect. He unfortunately passed away suddenly. He started this plan for me in 2020. And I have a horticulturalist that does his rest, so it's not entirely a civil engineer landscape design. I think it's actually pretty nice. And so we have with this, we have a buffer planting around the perimeter. We have, where did it go? Where's my number? We have 207 evergreen trees planted around the perimeter to meet the buffering requirement. And then on the interior of the parcel, we have 100 other trees that are both shade trees and flowering trees combined throughout in a lot of the many of the islands. And of course, in front around the detention basin, there is I believe 18 trees in this immediate vicinity, both shade trees and flowering trees in the front to provide some buffer. Amanda, you had mentioned that the one variance is for excavation, change in grade. The change in grade relief is required for the stormwater management system. It's right there on Asbury Avenue, and to make that function, we need it deeper. So there is an excavation there. I believe it's approximately 8 feet deep. The rest of the site is fairly at grade. There might be a few spots that are here and there that are 3 feet instead of 2. But it's plus and minus existing grade, just a nice consistent grade down to the front sloping from the back of the property to Asbury Avenue. That being said, there's also comments in the planner's report indicating that the contribution, there was likely a contribution to the tree, shade tree fund. And there is a need. We have a property here that I think we are 300 and some trees that are on site, but there's only a few qualifying trees because a lot of them are ash and they've all died. And we went out and did a survey of the ones that were clearly dead with the tops knocked off of them and so forth. And so there's only 168 trees, what they call what's been referred to as qualifying trees in the middle of the site that are live trees that we're removing. And that requires either 168 4-inch trees or 336 2.5-inch trees. As I mentioned before, we have 100, and so we're not going to fill in gaps to meet that number. So there will be some type of contribution to it. But there's some municipal or board professionals will want to look at the condition of the trees around the perimeter, and we may work jointly during construction to add trees here and move trees there. So the actual number is really not determinable at this point. I think it's a good plan that was proposed in the planner's report in terms of allowing them to look at what the site conditions are and make some field modifications to the buffer plantings and to the internal plantings, and then at the end of the day figure out what the total number is and make that contribution. But there would be a contribution. In addition to the trees in the landscape plan, we have 326 native shrubs to be planted in the islands and around the building. And we have 1,028 perennials and grasses, and we have 1,223 ground cover plantings. The detention basin is not only has the trees around it, but it also has seed mixes for a wet seed mix in the bottom and a wet tolerant seed mix on the slopes to add some stabilization and some beauty to that. So.
Very quickly, can you just address the garage, because I believe that was in a lot of reports, and I think that's what's triggering some variances of the D3.
Right. This garage here is for the maintenance of maintenance supplies. We had put it here. It's the most convenient. It does kick in the D3 variance on its own because it does not have sufficient setback to the paper street. And even if it was no longer a paper street, if it was vacated by the municipality, it would still not meet that standard. So our intention is to find a different place for it. And Amanda, could you put the other A2 back up, please? So it's a small garage. So but there is another alternate location that would comply and eliminate the need for D3 for that particular purpose, and that is right here in this little triangle where it would meet the setback requirements under any scenario. So that would eliminate that need, and then the D3 variance that we'll be providing planning testimony on would be solely...
Can I ask a question there?
Sure.
Wouldn't it make sense to take the trash area and move the trash area also over to that point?
Yes.
Yeah, because I have real concerns about the location of the trash area. I think it would be better to move the trash area closer to the shed.
Okay.
Happy to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So if we move it to those locations, it could make some improvements to the plan.
And gives you a couple more parking spaces too.
Yeah, a few more.
Can I ask a question also?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why, or could you consider adding more trees instead of just making a monetary contribution to the fund? We're so devoid of greenery as it is, and trees. I would strongly recommend adding trees. I know you are as it is, but instead of just blanketly saying let's make a monetary contribution, I would really like to see you add trees.
Okay, so just so I'm a little clearer, put A3 back up. We do think there are some locations where we can add trees.
Thank you.
and we will do that. And I'm sure that that Jim will be coming along, making those kind of recommendations, and that will change the number that we have on the plan,
Thank you.
particularly in this area. And if we're moving the garage and dumpster over here, then obviously we're going to want to put some there to further buffer that area. But I guess what my testimony really is I don't think I'm going to reach the requirement in the ordinance.
Understood.
That's really what my testimony is. Not that I'm unwilling to, or we're unwilling to add a couple more trees, but there might be, we're adding 15 or something like that, maybe 20, and that's not the extra. Well, if they fit, they have to survive. So
We can discuss the next one.
yeah, well, we'll have to lay it out and see what is the appropriate number.
Thank
Right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What borders the west, on the west side?
There's a building here, and it looks like a home of some type. I'm not sure exactly what the use is.
Please continue.
So, but you said the property has 3 front yards,
Now,
Front yard.
right?
no, it's just 2. It's
It's
Asbury and
Sharon, you have houses.
No, this is there's houses here. So this is one of these 2 has to be the rear yard. Okay, and so if this is rear, then this would be side, and vice versa. But either way, the rear yard's touching the front yard.
Sorry, 2 front yards.
Yeah. That's basically my direct testimony. If you want, I'll answer any other questions that you or your professionals have, or
You
try
mentioned
anyway.
the back area that would be additional parking. What is it currently? That I'm looking at the gold section and then behind, right there.
Right there, that's
That
a
the-
sidewalk in front of the main entrance to the building.
Where did you where is you mentioned additional parking?
Where the
It's-
trash is, if we move the trash over,
If we move this, if we move the trash from here
We'll
over to
get-
here, we can add a couple more parking spaces.
Okay.
looks like 2.
Yeah, they add a few more, and then it would put those 2 in the same place. In terms of access to those things, the site is designed for accessibility throughout that area.
Where's the fence line? I mean, where's the fence going?
Good question. I'm sorry I forgot that. So we have a fence along the sidelines. We have on this exhibit, which is we have a 6-foot fence from this point all the way around the back. Now, where this is 6 foot along the paper street, that still requires relief because it is technically a front yard and you can't be that high. It is you can see through the fence. It's non-climbable based on the police department recommendation that you can see through it. That they didn't want somebody to climb over it. So, if it's a chain link, for example, it would be a small link, a small opening in it, so that somebody couldn't put their shoe in it and climb over.
Has there been a detail of the fence submitted? I didn't see one. I don't know if I missed it.
We haven't got it on the plan yet, Jim. And then similarly, as we get to the front yard on Asbury, we're transitioning from the 6-foot fence here forward to a 4-foot fence, which is permitted as long as you can see through it. So we believe we're conforming with the exception of where we are on the paper street.
So the fence is on the property, roughly on the property line, and then inboard of that there's trees.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what all those marks are. Huh?
Those are all the evergreen trees, the double row of evergreen trees that are proposed.
And you mentioned the garage. You said a small garage. Define small garage for me. How big is a small garage?
That little tiny box.
Is it 10 by 10, 20 by 20,
It's
50 by
close-
50?
It's more by 20 by 20.
20 by 20,
size.
okay.
Yeah, and it's for lawn mowing equipment and other maintenance equipment for the site. Snow blowers, whatever they need to.
No.
Not parking a car in it. Yeah, it's all equipment for maintenance.
How far is the entrance from Cold Indian Springs? And I have concerns with where the entrance is. I know this area well because that's my route home.
Okay.
And traffic backs up in Cold Indian Spring or on Asbury trying to turn in the Indian Springs heading east. And I'd also like to, is the engineer going to come back?
Yeah, he's our planner as well.
Okay, because I have questions like we said, the soil perks. I live less than a mile from there. Nothing in that area perks at all. And matter of fact, on Asbury right now, there's water that's been running into the road for almost 3 weeks from the snow, and it freezes every night.
Okay, so all right. So to answer to your first question, it's off my map, so I'm going to give you an approximation. It's about 1,200 feet to Colding Springs Road.
Would they be able to turn left, heading east into the church there?
Yeah, they could. I think that's more of a question for the traffic engineer, and I'm sure he's studying all the movements. There's really not a significant traffic movement for it, but he'll get into that in more detail.
Also, I believe Asbury Avenue is jurisdiction of the county, so that they would ultimately decide whether or not that can occur. That's a county road.
Yeah, if they think there's a need for a prohibition of left turns, it's not safe or something. But the reason I placed it there is so that there's more sight distance. If somebody coming over the crest of the hill to the east will have ample time to see somebody turning left in. And there's a little bit more space than you would need to be for to see them and slow down, as opposed to be right at the design limit that would be required by the AASHTO code.
Do we have
So-
copies of your survey?
He's looking at his plans.
I just my plans. The
Front page.
survey is.
Copies of that?
We should have copies of that.
No, it's not in our packs.
This was submitted in 2020. We have had a very long road, and we were not supposed to come here. We were supposed to come to the planning board. Then the night of the planning board hearing, we were told that we needed a D3. So that's why we're here.
No, I understand
So-
that, and I know your path and journey has been long and winding. I
Very
understand
long.
that.
My child has aged several years since.
As have we. I was just asking if we had a copy of that.
You should have it.
You
I
should.
don't
It was
know your
submitted.
process in terms of
I
who gets
don't.
plans.
Do
So
any of you?
The movement of the driveway, when did that happen? And I'll tell you why I ask, because we have the 2022 note from traffic safety.
Mhm.
So was this before it was moved, or was the traffic safety?
it's probably after. I don't recall the exact date. Last revision I have is 3/21/23. It certainly was done I had a meeting in and before that, so because it was done with that last revision, I believe. But
And also,
it's
we're
right
happy to
here.
move it back to the center. That was how we.
But it
I
just-
was wondering, when the traffic safety person looked at it, they
Yeah.
said that they had no concerns. Were they looking at the location there, or were they looking?
They were looking at this location. I believe it was done sometime in 2021.
Over here.
It
You
was
said they were looking at this one where it's the
this
far
one where
left.
it's- Yes, initially when we first submitted,
So you have to
it
go
was
through
right
this
in the middle,
light,
right there
and you
where
gotta
that
try to
basin is.
turn here.
We
Into
received
the-
comments that was
Which
a
is-
concern, so we
And
had
that's
set
my
up
way
a
home
meeting
every day.
and we sat down with the township
And then they wanna
engineer,
come here.
and that's when it was recommended that
This
we
all
move it and we
floods
seek that
right now.
variance.
That's all ice in here.
Okay.
That's all this is running.
Yeah, I agree with what they're saying. I believe I don't remember the date either.
Yeah, I don't
when
remember the
exactly we met, but we had a technical review meeting prior to the application being submitted, I believe.
Mhm.
And that was one of the comments that came up, and it was when the submission was made. That's this is where the driveway is now, and I defer to the police traffic safety officer if they have any comments. I think that it is more appropriate to have the driveway where it's proposed on the plan now. One of my comments was to show a site triangle that complies with the state standards, and I'm sure the county will require the same thing, as well as a profile of the roadway. So because there is a vertical hill on Asbury Avenue, that's one of the reasons why it was a dangerous condition. So that's something that I think should be submitted and can be reviewed.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ben, but we do have a plan profile of Asbury Avenue. That shows the
Right, just
over
show-
the top of the hill.
Yeah, I think showing I can't remember if the site triangle was specifically shown on there or not, but
Yeah, well, we have the site triangle shown on one of the plans in terms of the setback from the driveway. If you're looking for a line of sight with the height of vehicles and stuff, I can add that if it's not on there.
yes,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
what I was
All
looking
right.
for.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Yes, how far away is the closest home to the property?
It seems to remain.
The whole east side.
Yeah, it a lot. I think it is the east side is the closest, but the back of the house on lot 75, for example, is 45 feet from the property line.
Can you show where that is with your red?
This is 45 right, one from the corner, 1, 2. Here is 45 is here. No, this one here is 45, and that's, or, I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking now. Lot 75, and it is approximately 45 feet from the property line to the back of the house.
Lot 75 is 45 feet.
That's correct.
An approximation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just scaling it here with a engineer scale, and then the one next to it is a little bit farther. Like the one on lot 74 is, they're all basically, they look different, but they're all basically 45 feet in that neighborhood.
45 feet.
Yep.
And the fence will go on the property line?
Yes.
And how far is the parking lot from the property line?
25 feet.
45. So you're 70 feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how many parking spaces did you say?
I have 228 actual physical spaces. We meet the required ADA parking, van spaces. It's all very flat in terms of code requirements there. But when you add the extra credit for the EV spaces, the 23 EV spaces, you get the 251.
So you have 251 parking spaces, including the 23.
Credits for EV, correct.
And when you say credits for the EV, can you explain that to me?
So when the state started requiring ready spaces for charging stations, they said that as an incentive to developers and people building, that you can count that parking space that has an electric charge station there as 2 spaces. So that is
Up to 10%.
Up to 10% of the required parking for the site. So we have 23 easy spaces. Our required parking is 251, so we're under the 10%. And so we get 23 space credit towards our total. So we just add that to the bottom line of the total.
Do you know what the occupation, like the occupancy level is for the building, for the actual church? How many people?
That's not a question for me. That's somebody else will talk. Probably Bob Dooley, the architect, will probably talk about the daily operation of the building and how everything works inside.
Yeah, that's something that I agree the architect will talk about, and also we're going to hear testimony from the traffic expert about the occupancy, any major events, traffic generators. That's all testimony that we should be hearing.
I also just want to clarify very quickly about the EV law. I've seen it 2 ways, just so you know. Either they say that you get the extra space or you reduce whatever your required parking is. I've seen the analysis done both ways. So either you say that we add 23 or the ordinance requirement is reduced by 23. As to occupancy is not what your parking standards is based on. It's based on number of seats. So that is where we got our calculation. But again, our traffic engineer will be addressing that. And Mr. Dooley, who's up next, will give more operational testimony as he's more familiar with the operations of the church.
So you said number of seats.
Number of seats. 450 seats.
450.
So the parking requirement is based on number of seats. We have 450 seats, and I believe it's 3 per seat. No, sorry, 3 per. What's the actual standard?
The actual
It's not 3 per seat. Sorry, that was a.
no, it's 1 per 3 maybe.
Yeah, that's definitely not it. Then we'd have about 1,000 spaces.
No, it's 1 per 2.
One.
For 2 seats.
Yep, 502 seats total if you count the choir seats, which is actually operationally is not the way they run their organization. The choir people come out of the audience, so those seats in the audience become vacant. But the strictest interpretation for zoning would be to count all seats that are in there, and that would give you 502 and 251 required is at a rate of 1 per 2. Yeah, one parking space for every 2 seats.
And I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask this question or not, but what is the average size of church? How many people, how many seats do the average church fit? I mean, it seems like this is a rather large church.
I don't know the actual answer, but I will tell you that I have a application for a religious organization in Fairlawn, and they have 475 for on a 1 acre property, and then I have another one in Rockaway that has 1,500 seats in their church. So somewhat is dependent upon, you know, their community, but I don't know the relationship. What's the average, or what's the largest, or so forth.
What is the
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
what is the current use of the property?
Vacant. I believe there might be a single family home.
There's 2 single family homes there and driveways, and it's just what's there.
It's heavily wooded.
Yeah.
With what Mr. Anders said, many dead trees.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
From what I see in the report, it's 163 dead trees, 168 live trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just so the board is aware, there is actually an approved single-family subdivision for that site that was approved probably 10 to 15 years ago. But it's still a valid approval.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Go back to the driveway. Sorry.
Sure.
Was there anything else considered? Would there be roadway improvements that could be done? Whether or not it's actually on the road or if it's just off the side of the road, that would improve sight lines to move the driveway away from residences? Not answer the question right.
To have an exit entrance.
To have an entrance more towards the middle and more towards the hill that you're telling me about. Is there any alternatives or anything that could be suggested?
You're asking about like road widening.
Road wide.
Are you talking about like knocking down the hill?
Yeah.
There's no hill there. I don't know.
It's mild. It's mild.
So again, the road is the county's jurisdiction, so they have to approve that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, I
best
get
we
that.
can do is move the driveway.
Yeah. So where you have Sharon Drive is approximately the top of the hill, and as you get past that, you start getting just very slightly lower to a point where the driver can't see too far over the hill, like not where the driveway would be in the middle of the site, right in here where we had it. Now, in terms of the design speed of Asbury Avenue and the requirement from AASHTO, what stopping site distance would be, it was okay, but it was right, like I said, I forget what the number was, but if it was like 350 feet, I had like 355, and I said, well, there's an accident history here. Why don't we be cautious? Why don't we make it a little bit safer? Because in the other direction, it's really flat and it's wide open in terms of being able to see adequately in the other direction. So why don't we just balance it out a little bit? It does create the relief we're asking, but we do have a minor road widening and a dedication that are improvements to Asbury Avenue. But in terms of driveway location is really what the bullet we have in our gun to shoot on this. And if it's thought that it would be better 20 feet to the right, then we could do that but I don't see the hardship in putting it where it is.
There's a house there, right?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
I pictured churches that I've gone to in and out of
Mhm.
where the location is, where you have a long stream of cars coming and going, how close it is to the neighbor property, and I'm picturing it being that close could be an issue.
Okay, let me see.
So that's why I'm trying to, I understand that there was an accident there at one point. Is there any way we could get creative and not have the driveway so close to the neighbor's property?
It is close to the property line, but it's 160 feet from the edge of the house. So,
If the board professionals support it, we'll move it back to the middle.
yeah, and we're just trying to have a safer site plan. I think it works the other way too. And if you want us to put it right down the middle, we can do that. But whatever your guidance is, we can make it work.
Exit and entrance. What if there's
Well,
different?
Mr. Higgins and Mr. Matlack, seems like you're trying to say something. Can you address left, middle?
Well, so I guess the original alignment, having the driveway in a conforming location, did comply with the site distance requirements. But the accident history, encouraged the decision to move the driveway. It could still conform in the center of the lot, and comply with the regulations, but that was the recommendation that was made.
I'm certainly not trying to dismiss the accident history.
Yeah.
It was one accident?
Well,
And
I don't know if,
was it-
is the board aware of the nature of that accident?
No, that's
Okay.
kind of
What happened, as I recall it, if it's the one I'm thinking of, somebody traveling westbound on Asbury Avenue, coming up the hill, decided to pass the car in front of him, and when they did that, they couldn't see the car coming eastbound because of the vertical curve of the road, and they had a head-on collision, killing somebody. So there's definitely a vertical curve that does obscure visibility of vehicles coming.
So they're heading
from one direction to
westbound
the other.
toward the
They were headed westbound towards the
or
parkway, and
toward this property or away from the property?
what I don't know exactly where on the street it was, but I know it was probably further to the east. If the peak of the hill is Sharon Drive, it was probably further to the east. I'm sure a police report could
They're
clarify
driving on
that.
the wrong side of the road.
How would you get
You tried to pass and couldn't see the car coming the other direction.
There's two driveways now. For the house on the west side, the driveway is approximately right here to the west of where we're proposing this driveway, and the other one is about in the middle third for the house that's to the east on the property. So you already have a driveway just to the left of where we're proposing that would be removed.
driveway that you're proposing, how wide is that driveway?
It's 24 feet, I believe. Yeah, 24 feet.
Any other questions from board members?
Does the church actually own the property now?
Yes.
There's no contingencies on it, or?
No, they just bought it outright.
Any other board member questions? Okay, questions from the public for Mr. Anderson. Does Mr. Gazarovski, is this? I'm sorry, I understand Mr. Gazarovski is here, but just from a legal perspective, I wasn't sure which witness, I thought he was questioning at the end, but I could be mistaken.
I'm sorry.
For just procedural,
Yeah.
previously I'll say the opposing attorney questioned at the end. Do you have any recommendations?
So I suspect that because of the length of the application and the number of witnesses, it would be more practical and organized if you allow Mr. Gazarovski to ask any questions of the professional as they appear, and
Okay.
rather than waiting until the very end, when it'll probably be at another meeting anyhow.
Okay.
If I may,
Yes.
introduce myself. I disagree with my colleague. There are a number of questions that were posed to this witnesses, and obviously there are a number of unanswered responses to those questions. Some of the testimony which he has given is dependent upon testimony coming from other people, whether it be the sound expert, traffic planner, and or the like. He just simply gave us engineering testimony, but much of what he's saying is dependent upon the comments of other experts. I found it much better for the questioning to come at the end of the hearing rather than my asking a series of questions now and then have to have them recalled at a later date. I would submit to you it's just confusing to do it that way.
So you would
Having
prefer
said
just
that,
to wait?
I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm not bragging about that, but I think when the entire case is in a planning case, this isn't a trial for a point, that sort. Much of his testimony will be tempered by the testimony of other witnesses. So let's get it all in. I'll question examine them once, and that'll be it.
Okay, so you
That's
can.
my request.
You request granted. So thank you. Questions for Mr. Anderson from the public?
How tall is the building?
One second. If you have a question, and please, who, what, when, where, why, how, if, do, does, please ask a question without leading statements. A question for Mr. Anderson. Please come to the microphone when called upon. State your name and state your address and ask your question of Mr. Anderson. Is there anyone from the public who has a question for Mr. Anderson? And I apologize, since I don't know names, I'm just going to ask the person that I see here if you can please come to the micro. No, I'm sorry. If you can come to the microphone, please, and state your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Gail Callens. I live on 22 Sharon Drive. Now, Sharon is a horseshoe, so when you mention Sharon each time, I'm not sure you're talking about the west side or the east side. I'm assuming it's the west side because that would be impacted most. And I'm not sure that my questions are being asked at the right time. One question is that you're putting in retaining ponds for water, and that there is a spring running east to west about 15 feet from Asbury Avenue. And I know that for a fact because my driveway will soon be slipping onto Sharon Drive because the spring rises and falls, and every time it rises, the crack in my driveway gets bigger. This crack also crosses the east side of Sharon Drive, and I believe, and I'm not sure, empties into a retaining pond on the east side of Sharon. So if you're willing to put money into the tree fund, please put money into my driveway fund.
Do you have a question?
So that,
Your question
yes,
is, are you
I
aware
want
of
you
a
to put
spring,
money in
right?
the fund to fix my driveway when it slides into the street. Secondly, I am against the number of, and I don't know if this is the right point.
Do you have a question?
Question. Can we reduce the number of parking spots, because that's one spot per two people, which is a lot, and very close to the property line. Somehow we have to reduce that to get it away from the property. Question, is it a slab? Because the slab goes back to the
Well, Miss,
spring.
he can maybe he can answer.
Is it on
You
a
have an
slab?
answer? No, back to the.
I'm certainly not going to answer.
To
I'm an
address the
attorney,
parking.
but he can answer.
Because if it's not on the slab, you're
But the parking
impacting.
question first. The parking spot question.
I think
Parking
spring
spots.
was first.
Spring first.
So the.
I don't care what you do first.
Thank you. Because I very often go backwards anyway. So with the spring, we have soil testing from the original approval that is in the vicinity of where you're talking about. It has no evidence of any springs or groundwater seepage in them. We will be doing some additional testing there, and we will look into that. I appreciate you bringing that up so that we can actually look for it.
Well, you're welcome to look at my.
And then the
driveway on
parking
street.
question.
And in terms of the, I will get to that. We are talking about the west part of Sharon Drive.
We're
So
talking
that-
the east side of Sharon.
well, when we see the west,
Well, I'm sure that the creek, that the spring runs all the way across.
yeah, I'm just saying that when you ask, I'm not sure where I'm talking about when I'm talking about Sharon Drive. I'm talking
The west side.
it's the west part or connection to Asbury Avenue, because that's the one that abuts our site,
Okay.
our property. In terms of the parking,
Huge.
parking ratios for religious organizations, many studies have been done where it's 2.3 to 2.5 is the ratio, not 1 to 2. So if the board would accept that, it's not what the ordinance requires. But the board would have to direct us to reduce it based on a different ratio. But that is not unusual to see a different ratio in my past experience in other projects.
And
I just,
maybe an-
I want to add just one thing to that, one possibility. First of all, we have a traffic engineer that's going to testify.
Correct.
And submit a
based
report.
on- Based on his testimony, the board may want to consider green banking for the public. What that means is designing parking spaces, but not building them at this point if they're not needed. And then if it's determined later on in the game that they're needed, then they could be constructed.
Yes, and that's another common practice.
Happy to do that.
What is our ordinance required? Does it?
One space per 2 seats.
Okay. And you're suggesting two.
I'm just saying that my past experience, I've seen 2.3 to 2.5 is what I've seen in other municipalities, and based on some studies, actual counts of cars. The one project I have in Rockaway that I mentioned, we had a previous approval where they accepted 2.3 as the ratio.
Do you have
So
any studies that you could?
We're going to be
the traffic
providing a
engineer for
traffic
that
study.
project had that, and so Jim is correct in saying that it's a traffic engineering question, but I'm just relating that it's not unusual to see different ratios, but it does require relief from the board.
In order for the board to consider changing the parking requirement, because they do meet exactly the number of parking spaces that are required by the ordinance. In order to change that, we would need a traffic study that would demonstrate why a different parking ratio would be particularly appropriate for this site.
And we probably have to have some operational information about the church, because it looks like just about everybody that'd be coming to this church will be driving. Unless there's going to be a bus or bring buses bringing people up, minibuses, that type of thing.
And how many members do you have?
I don't have the answer to how many members the church has, but I can tell you that Lee Klein is our traffic engineer. He is preparing a traffic study. You will get one. It will give you the ITE data and all of the information.
Will you be able to advise us as to how many members you have at some point?
At some point.
Okay.
Just
thank you.
it's just not engineering testimony,
I
right? So
understand
yeah.
that completely. This is just the
Yeah.
next step.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So I have a question for traffic. I don't know if I can.
That's
pose it
the
now.
engineer.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
The gentleman's behind Mr. Gazarowski, if you can state your name and your address.
James Cimitazio, 20 Mallard Lane. I'm just curious how tall the building is.
Based on the height calculation is required by the ordinance for 30.67 feet.
Okay, is it a standard 30.67 feet?
It's
from,
based
from a raised grade, or
from the I forget exactly how we did that. I think it's from average grade around the building. I'd have to go back and look at the ordinance, but that's what it calculates.
and there won't be? Will there be like religious symbols of any sort, like crosses?
Okay, so I think as you're talking about the building appurtenances, you need to ask the architect. He'll probably have an exhibit that shows you what it looks like, and he can explain to you what all those things look like and the materials used and things like that.
That's fabulous.
So, all right.
Thank you, guys.
Anytime.
I believe there was a gentleman in the back who had a... Yes, please come to the microphone. State your name and your address.
My name is Victor Rusomano. I live at 2713 Asbury Avenue. I live about 120 feet from the corner of the property, right behind Sharon Drive. My first question is, Asbury Avenue floods today where the property is now, with 7 acres of God-given grass and trees and drainage. Your proposal to cover almost the entire area with the impervious hardtop, what is the plan to make sure that we stop the flooding that's there now and it doesn't drain into the drain which goes across the Sharon Drive into the drainage ditch that's on the other side of Sharon Drive on the eastern side?
Okay.
Which hasn't been dredged in about 40 years.
Well, it's not going to flow towards Sharon. Sharon is uphill from our property.
Sharon's downhill from your property. I live there.
Oh, okay.
You might want to walk it.
Well, I'm just
Sorry.
looking at the topo we have for the site, and it doesn't show it that way. But I will tell you that we have the stormwater management systems that I was discussing before. The porous pavement system is a large gravel layer below it, and that has to be interconnected to a permeable layer of soil. Sometimes you have impervious layers at the top that have to be broken through in order for you to get to the sand that will absorb the water better. So that it's possible that what you're seeing is existing water sitting on top of that hard pan or whatever that's at the top and not getting to the permeable layer. Well, we'll be, in order to get our approval, particularly from the county, we'll have to demonstrate that we have the permeability at the infiltration level that will absorb that water into the ground. Now, the testing that was done previously, and we'll have new tests to back this up, show extremely rapid permeability at that lower level. And that's what we're connecting to.
At the lower level.
Yes,
right,
so
okay.
the water will go in there and very little will run out to Asbury Avenue because it'll all absorb into the ground because it's got through the hard pan layer. That's how we're proposing to do that. We will have to demonstrate all of that to all the approvals, not only the board's engineer, but to the county engineer.
Okay. The next question is moving there's only one entry and exit to the property, is that correct?
Correct.
So at this time, Asbury Avenue, as you know, is a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. And when you catch the light at Nobility Crest, is that what it's called? And then at Bound Road, I think, it becomes a speedway. I live on there, I have a special needs daughter. People almost hit the bus. The police sit outside my house and write tickets all day long. The thought of having 200 cars backed up to go to a service, which you have 200 parking spots, actually it's a little bit more if I remember correctly. What is the plan to be able to get 200 cars into a parking lot in an expedient manner where it's not going to cause accidents because of the sight line coming west on Asbury Avenue, and then again leaving?
So part of the traffic study that's going to be submitted to the board our traffic engineer has gone out, he's done traffic counts at various days, particularly the ones associated when services would be. And he understands what the base traffic is on the roadway. He'll testify to this in much greater detail. It's really a question for him. I'll just explain to you what's coming. Is then he projects the traffic that's coming in all to that service and how they leave the service. And then he sees what it does in terms of not only delays, but queuing coming in and out of the entrance. So if there was a queuing that
exit help, would it help somewhat alleviate some of that, I guess would be the question.
I don't think he found that would be required, but you'll have to hear it from him directly because he has the data that backs it up and I do not.
Right, and then the fence that you talked about, the perimeter, is the whole perimeter of the property fenced in?
On the what I would normally call the sidelines and the rear property lines, yes, it's all fenced in.
Okay, and then is there also a fence around the retention basin?
There is not.
Okay, is there any thought to adding something to that if there's going to be standing water in there with kids playing? Like I said, I have a special needs daughter that lives 100 feet from it. I would not like my daughter to walk up the street now on a sidewalk and play in a retention pond there.
Yeah, I understand that point. There's a prohibition against fences in the front yard like that, and we could consider it, but I think we'd have to look and see what we have to do to make it less visible.
Okay, so that's all for now.
That's always something we can ask you to do in the application, especially if it comes to safety of children.
course.
And if there's
I mean, there's a
water,
preschool right across the street from it as well.
then that's a very important requirement and consideration on our part, and something we can ask of them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, please come to the microphone. And sir, if you want to come up, you'll be next. And if you can state your name and address.
I'm Michelle, 2717 Asbury Avenue. Last name's protected by Daniel's law. I guess my first question is, are you aware that the property does not abut to Sharon Drive? Because you've said that a few times.
Yes.
Okay, just for clarification, my property abuts to Sharon Drive. The proposed property is adjacent to approximately 45 probably % of my yard. Just to reiterate what Victor said, I had the same question about the fence around the retaining pond or the retention basin. I know you said it's about 6 feet deep. When I'm looking at the plan, it's maybe a 6 foot grade decrease this way, but that's in addition to other ones. And where I was reading it, it's possibly up to 10 feet of standing water. And there are children on every side of that property adjacent. So I would ask again, I also wanted to make sure, are you aware that the driveways you were referencing, that there's already 2 driveways there, one in a similar spot? Are you aware that they are 6 foot wide dirt driveways?
Yeah.
They're not 24 foot driveways. I'm sorry, I have so many questions, but I don't think they're all for you. The 23 EV spots, are they going to be considered private property or publicly accessible? I don't know if that's you or not.
Yeah, you know, we generally consider them as private, but I mean, there's a possibility that they could be, you know, for public if people want to come in, and there's some fee associated with it, but that complicates things in terms of traffic and parking requirements and other things like that.
Well, if it's publicly accessible, they have to be available 24 hours a day, and they have to be on the state's EV website. So would these 23 spots be listed on the state's website?
We haven't really considered that at this point. You're just bringing it up as a new topic for us. So right now, it was all private.
Okay, 23 EV spots in my backyard is a concern, so I would like you to consider whatever you can do. It's the size of a gas station, basically, in my backyard.
I do not think at this time we have a need to rent them out for public. I think it's meant for parishioners who have EV vehicles, Rivians, Teslas.
No, I understand that, but then, so they would be only operational during times when the church was operating as an open church?
Yes, it very well could be done that way.
But there's no definitive answer yet.
Well, you know, the topic you're bringing up, that they're rentable, whatever, yes, it's possible, but there has never been any thought given to having them that until you just answered the question, asked the question.
Okay.
So we don't have intent to have a gas station in your backyard.
I mean, if you could give additional thought to that now, because that was certainly one of my first thoughts.
Okay.
As far as I know, there's only 2 or 3 other EV stations within town. And we are an exit route for people that are coming into Asbury and have to get back to the Parkway. So it would be a desirable area for people to quick stop and charge their car, and then I would have 24-hour people in my backyard charging their vehicles.
Is that one of the considerations, that you're going to be rent?
No.
No, it was never a consideration. It's brought up for the first time right now, and it's not something that we've been proposing. Is it possible? Yeah, but it's not something we
No,
can
it's
consider.
not something they could do without returning to the board for a use variance.
I don't think we would allow that. I think that we would even make
We
it
are
a...
providing EV stations to comply with state law. That's it.
And I understand that too. I know
Okay.
you have, I get
And
that.
thank you, Mr. Higgins, for clarifying. If it is a request, it comes back before the board. It has not come before the board at this time.
That's correct.
Okay, next question.
And there was that. I believe this had already come up from one of the board members. The proposed dumpster is approximately 30 feet from my vegetable
We're
garden.
going to relocate it. Don't worry about it.
That was, okay, well, the lighting. I know there was already the variance regarding the lighting towers and all of that. When I went to the town hall and I looked at all the plans, and there was the lighting, I guess, diagram for what the lighting would affect. The parking lot lighting and the entry and exit lighting is then lighting the western 15 to 20% of my property, and in the one corner where this lot where 2795 abuts on this corner, it's a whole swath of property that is then having basically ambient parking lot lighting. Can that be addressed?
Yes.
I mean, I
So-
understand lighting, and the police department recommended lighting. I understand the safety of it. I get that. But I don't want parking lot lighting also in, you know, the whole, in all of our, and I would assume it goes to the neighboring yards. Can that be addressed?
Yes, that's actually one of the comments that are part of the engineer's review, is that we need to work on the lighting intensity at the property line. So that would be part of the issues that we would be addressing with the revised lighting plan. Also, the police review does heavily rely on overall safety, and they seem to want more lighting and things than I normally see on a site plan, normally recommend for a site plan. I don't know that it's required, but normally I would recommend that when the church does not have people there, that it goes to a security lighting, which is a really low level lighting, so it doesn't disrupt anybody else in the neighborhood, just so that it's around the building, and you know, if there's somebody nefarious there wanting to do something, they can be seen, and you say, who's that over there doing that, but not so bright that it's keeping you up at night, kind of thing.
Yeah, we would happily accept a condition that the lights go to security lighting when the church is not operational. This is not going to be a 24-hour operation.
And then we can ask additional questions regarding operation. You said maybe with another.
This is
person,
not the
right?
witness. He's just
Right,
the
but
engineer.
that's what I-
Our architect will tell you more about the church operations.
The other concern, there was a note in from Mr. Kirk's report with the trees, and again with the retention basin, and a concern that with how steep the retention basin is, that some of the landscaping that was planted along there would not be sustainable. Would you consider moving additional landscaping outside of that retention basin, because there is plenty of room to meet the threshold of replacing every tree in all of that area? There was a lot of landscaping and larger caliper trees within that 21% downgrade of the basin that would not be sustainable.
Okay.
There was a note of that, but there is room outside of the basin to move those trees or add additional trees that would be sustainable to both the east, the east side of the basin for sure. I know to the west side of the basin is the entryway.
Well, I think we can plant the trees in a way where they're sustainable there, but that does not, as I indicated before with the board member's question, we are open to adding some additional trees where there is space. And so that, I mean, I don't know that we're going to meet the requirement that, as you're suggesting, but, and that's why I indicated that I think we're going to need to have some amount of contribution to the shade tree fund.
I disagree. Regarding,
Evergreen?
so many more.
What's that?
Around the borders, all evergreen trees, right?
But they don't count towards the replacement.
So I just want a point of clarification, because everyone's saying trees. The green is just, all of these are evergreens, all around the border.
No, I understand.
Okay, so there are a
But-
bunch of evergreens going in.
But they
Right,
did
but
not.
also
they're-
evergreens that are replacing deciduous trees with larger
Yes.
root-based
Well,
root
we're not-
systems that are gonna, you know.
We did not call for the removal of the existing trees there unless they're dead. So that is one of the things that the board professionals want to look at, is if there is a mature tree in that area that can suffice and you don't need the double row in that location, maybe the existing tree replaces that buffer planting. Or maybe you move the buffer planting a little bit and leave the tree. So we have no intention of removing the trees in the buffer unless they're dead or there's some grading issue that requires them to be removed. So, and those have all been indicated on the plans. But yeah, we're not tearing it down completely to the property line and just planting the evergreens. The existing ones that are there, as many that are alive and healthy, are going to stay.
I understand that, and I reviewed that plan in depth while walking the perimeter of my lot with the pictures in there. And I don't know, I know you had said it was started by somebody else who passed away, and I'm not, whatever happened after that. But when I walk the perimeter and I compare the paper of what trees are within that 25-foot that are dead and being removed, or that are living and staying, they do not match up with the trees that are actually there in place. And I can tell you that no dead tree from that lot has been removed from that lot in decades. That's the house I was born and raised in. So it's not like they miraculously disappeared in the last 2 years. Nobody was there cutting them down. There also is a concern because there's marked on there that you guys, not you, but the applicant is going to keep this one large tree but that's my tree. It's not even it's not on that lot. It's on my lot.
Well, then,
So I have
you're
concerns.
actually keeping it then.
I have concerns that the numbers may not be accurate. I would also ask that maybe everybody consider looking at it in person again 3 years later to see what actually is there, what is going to be removed, and what is alive and what can stay.
I think Mr. Anderson had testified that he plans on walking the property with your planner to do all of that.
Yeah, and that's how you get to the determination of whether you can replace some of those buffer plantings and leave the existing tree, or whether there's an error in what's a dead tree or a live tree, and those are, so that's why I was saying that it's a little bit of a fluid situation in terms of what the replacement count would be.
I also think it could be possible there's confusion.
Now, is there a question?
Yes, if there could be double checked that there's not a property line confusion at the one section where where it juts out, where the dumpster was going to go, because the surveyor did not mark that corner either. The other corners of my property were all freshly marked. That corner was not ever marked. That is near some of the trees that are listed as belonging to that lot that are not. The original concrete marker is still there. I would have to call my dad to tell you exactly where it is, but it's there under some of the dead leaves. But that one was not marked out, which may also then be part of the confusion if you could relook at that.
Mr. Anderson, when you walk the property, I want to make a request to walk it with you, please.
Sure.
Thank you. So much of what I'm seeing there is just impervious land, which led to my original question about adding shrubbery and extra trees where you can.
Yeah.
Hence the runoff, hence the flooding. We need as much shrubbery and trees as you possibly can get there to help absorb the water. And I'm not seeing that on the plan.
Well, we have 200 and some evergreen trees around the perimeter.
I
This
know,
is
and
significant.
so much gray matter, which is a big problem. And
So
I
the
know you're
trees will
working with
certainly
us.
be addressed. I know that.
Yeah.
Trees
I
will be
understand
addressed.
that. And this is
I don't
the
want
first
to
meeting.
take away your time, but I know a lot of people have problems with the retention basin. Does it have to be there? Is that a buffer zone, Mr. Higgins? Could you put parking spots there where
It's not a buffer zone, no.
so there could be parking spots where the basin is and possibly move the
I
basin?
think that's an engineering issue because water flows in certain directions.
I think it would help with maybe some of the neighbors. It would help create a buffer. You really don't need to buffer on Asbury Avenue. I think some of the neighbors would prefer it. At least I would. I'd rather have the retention basin behind my house than cars.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any locations near the neighbor's property that would be suitable. I think they're higher ground from where we're coming from our grades. But, it's an ideal location where it is on Asbury.
But there are some valid concerns about the standing water there. I live in front of a retention basin, so I'm very familiar with.
Okay,
Yeah.
next question.
It was mentioned, the plan said that it was going to be a solid white fence, and then something was mentioned here about how it might be chain link. Is there a final decision on that? And what would be the contributing factors for one or the other?
So there was a recommendation from the police department that there was visibility through it. And there's a different standard in front yards for visibility, for the height of the fence, when you have visibility through it or whether it's solid. And at some point we probably did have a solid fence, but the recommendation was, and it's on the exhibit, says basically is that it's non-climbable, see-through fence. So that's basically, a typical example would be like a chain link fence with a smaller mesh.
I don't think the boards have approved a chain link fence of that extent any time in the past, and I don't think they will. I think maybe an estate-type fence that's decorative would be appropriate.
Okay.
But a chain link just isn't gonna fly.
Okay.
And I believe I heard correctly that it's the fences along the property line and then the 25-foot buffer of evergreens is within the applicant's property from the fence?
That's correct.
And now the fencing goes up to what was the dumpster area and stops straight there, or does it cut across around the parking lot with
So
all these changes?
at that point, it still follows the property line towards the front, but it changes in height because it becomes in the front yard of the building. So so the distance between the front, well, it's actually the front setback, but we've made it the front of the building. We've taken it from there and transitioned to a 4-foot fence as opposed to 6. If we go to a solid fence, for greater privacy, it'd have to be a 3-foot fence going forward towards
And that's
Asbury
what-
Avenue.
That's with the area. So now, you're talking about fencing almost all the way to Asbury Avenue? Or just to the edge of the parking lot and then dropping the height and continuing?
Dropping the height and continuing, it goes almost to Asbury Avenue. The thing that would limit its location is visibility for vehicles leaving sight distance.
And the widening of the road, that would be consistent so that now the current sidewalk that exists along Asbury Avenue would match up to the proposed sidewalk with the same width of curbing and grass and the same width of shoulder there?
That's correct.
And the telephone poles will be moved?
As required, yes.
That's what I have for you. Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman in the back had a question. And if you can state your name and your address.
In reference to her law that she said that I don't have to reveal my last name.
I'd like to make a comment on that, if you don't mind. And I intended to do it last time. I'm assuming that the property owner before was citing Daniel's law. We're all familiar with it. I want to just call your attention, as my understanding that it was passed on January 12th of 22. We know it was the result of an unfortunate incident, but it was very specific as to who was covered by the law. And I haven't completely researched it, but I have looked at some of it. And it cites that it's to protect covered persons who were former, active, or retired judicial officers, prosecutors, members of law enforcement, and immediate family members residing in that household. So, Madam Chairman, I would suggest that we respectfully ask the witness if he is in any one of those categories to take the benefit of the protection of Daniel's law.
That's fine. My name is Thomas Dunnigan. I live at 224B Old Indian Springs Road. My house abuts the back of the proposed church. One thing I'd like to know is, where is the new dumpster going to be? Can you please show that to me on here?
Get your pointer.
Yeah. So it's approximately right here.
That would be mine. So you're gonna put a dumpster in my backyard? I want to ask that. That's where my backyard would be, right there. So I would have a dumpster filled with garbage in my backyard. Is that what you're saying?
That is the location.
That's
that
correct, right?
conforms.
Technically, it wouldn't be your backyard, it's on our property.
Yeah, but I would get the stench, and I would get the vermin that come into that.
That is what the board professionals have requested that we relocate.
So
trash.
you can relocate that to any part of that property, and guess what? You're going to be abutting someone's property, and they're going to have a dumpster in their backyard, or just adjacent to their backyard, where they once had trees.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes. So it was about the EV spaces. So what deterrence is there going to be to not commercialize these EV spaces in the future? There could be 2 years from now, someone comes in and said, we want to use these for revenue generation for the church.
May I
stop that?
answer that? I was going to say, I believe Mr. Higgins addressed that. Just to recall previous testimony that if that were the case, it would have to come before this board again.
That's correct.
You would have to get approval.
Sometimes we can issue things with restrictions that will say this is only passed with the caveat that XYZ never happened.
Can we get, can we somehow build into the, whatever zoning laws that you put in place around this, that any property adjacent to that would be notified of any change in that use?
Let me just handle this. Yeah. So if we did that, that would probably be considered another use in the property. We would have to come back before this board, and similar to this application, you'd get 200-foot notice. We're not proposing that, and we're happy to put as a condition of approval that we will not be renting out the EV stations. Again, the EV stations are being put in to comply with state law because we have to put them in. I, as a developer's attorney, we don't like putting in EV stations. They're expensive. We have to do it now because in July of 2021, the state passed a law saying you have to. So any development coming before this board that has, I think, with retail, it has to be more than 25 off-street parking spaces. Any multifamily residential has a standard, has to provide these spaces. Now, they don't have to be actual EV stations. They have to be make-ready technology, meaning they have to have the conduits and wiring underneath them that eventually they have to become EV stations. And there's a whole timetable that the law lays out. However, we are not doing this because we're trying to somehow squeeze money out of random people coming to park their car. We're doing this to comply with state law because we have to.
And then to answer
This country, and
the other part of your question, you made a request of the board. That is something that the board can consider when the board votes, and we are not voting right now.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay. Anyone else from the public? Yes. If you can please state your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Matt Ford, and I live at 224B Colding in Springs Road. I have one very quick question. What is the inherent benefit of the building there, taking down all those trees, putting in lights, and increasing the amount of traffic that's going to be occurring on Asbury Avenue and all the other contiguous streets around there?
What is the inherent benefit?
Because you've said a couple of times that there's an inherent benefit to having this type of structure built in the neighborhood. What is the inherent benefit to our community?
I can address this. So I'll stop. You are talking about planning testimony, not engineering testimony. We're not there yet. This could be our last witness.
Is it regarding the plan that he's doing here?
No, that this was engineering testimony. We're going to have planning testimony. Licensed professional planner, Mr. Anderson, will come back and he'll go through the MLUL, the statutory criteria. Mr. Higgins talked about the D3 standard, the substantial, there's a positive and a negative criteria you need to meet. And we will put that all out on the table, and then you can ask those questions. I will say that churches generally are inherently beneficial, and that's typically seen when you're going for a D1 use variance, which we are not doing here. We're going for a D3. This use is permitted by ordinance.
I understand that, but what is the inherent benefit?
But just, I believe what you're referring to was her opening,
Yes.
and that there will be additional testimony forthcoming.
The term inherently beneficial is defined in state law, in a law called the Municipal Land Use Law, and it says it's a use that by its very nature is inherently beneficial to the municipality, such as, and it lists churches, schools, hospitals, those types of things. And it's a legal term, but it's also a term of art.
Okay,
So by being a church, it is inherently beneficial to the municipality.
I guess at the risk of being obtuse, I don't understand what the benefit is going to be to the people who live there and whose properties are going to be adversely affected by the additional traffic, the additional lighting.
And again, you're talking apples and oranges.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the public? I did see a gentleman here. Please come up, state your name and your address.
Nick Lorelei, 13 Sharon Drive. First question, would you consider scaling back the plan to basically try to accommodate a lot of the questions that were raised with respect to dumpster, drainage, driveway?
So I actually was going to ask the board if, with our next resubmission, we're going to resubmit to you. Would you like to see green bank parking spaces? Would you like to see that an option based on our traffic study, and you could see what it would look like if we have less parking spaces.
Well, I'm not
Be
just talking
great.
about parking spaces, I'm talking about the size of the whole facility. It's going into a residential area and this building is huge. Would you consider scaling it back?
I do not have an answer to you. I have to speak with my client about that, but we would definitely consider green banking parking spaces because I think that would make a very big difference.
Next question, and I'm assuming no questions right now with respect to traffic, that'll be.
Just the engineer, Mr.
With
Anderson.
respect to drainage, can you talk about drainage from the rear of the property? Is it going to all slope towards the front, or is it going to slope towards the houses on Sharon Drive along the perimeter where it's just right now?
So all of the pavement slopes towards the front of the property. The slope between the property line and on Sharon, on the houses on Sharon Drive and this property slopes down towards the parking lot. Almost the entire property will be collected based on proposed grades in those 2 detention systems. There's only a small triangular area in.
Could you point that out? I wasn't sure where that triangular area is. Is that in the rear?
That's in the rear, which is where we're really doing nothing.
Okay, you know.
Except for buffer planting.
All right, you're not going to regrade that at all?
No,
So it slopes towards
the
front?
regrading starts here, right? And that water comes this way, and then the rest of it goes that way. It's all existing conditions, and that's buffer planting, just putting trees in as required by ordinance.
Okay, I live right over there, and that was my concern is, I already get water in that corner. And my concern is with the pavement, I need to be getting more water.
Yeah, no, that's the high point in the back, and it's all going to be directed towards the front, and potentially it'll take some of the area that drains towards your property now and bring it the other way.
I noticed the permeability test was done April 2003. Are you going to be doing a new test?
Yes.
Okay. Will that test take into consideration that you're losing all these trees that would absorb water?
It doesn't. A permeability test looks at the nature of the soil and how much permeability it has. The drainage calculations themselves account for the change in coverage of what the lot is. It goes from tree cover, a wooded cover, to a pavement. The amount of rain, the amount of runoff generated is drastically different between those 2 extremes.
Understood. With respect to permeability and drainage, I understand you talked about how this is going to be permeable and it'll be soaked up. Will any of that be draining towards the
No.
houses on Sharon Drive
No.
as it is as it is absorbed? No? You talked about the sanitary sewer you were going to extend out on.
Yes, it's going to come out the.
Are those questions valid now or for later?
Yes.
For the engineer.
Okay. As was brought up, it floods here all the time. The county actually puts cones out there so that people won't go through the standing water. How are you going to connect to a sanitary sewer that right now backs up? Is that going to be part of it? Is there going to be re-engineering?
Sanitary sewer goes out the building and then up
I'm sorry,
the
the
hill.
sewer that's out on the street right now.
The
on
storm,
Asbury
the,
Avenue.
the storm sewer.
Yes.
We're connecting to that, and we're
Yes.
reducing the flow to it from the property.
But if it backs up now, you're still going to be having new flow going into that storm sewer.
We're not having
Will
new
that-
flow. We have less than the flow that's going in it today from our property. The
Okay.
requirements for your per ordinance and state standard is that you reduce the flow by 50%. So if you have 1 cubic foot per second coming towards that drainage system now and it's flooding, we have to discharge at a rate of 0.5 CFS. And so for heavier storm, the heavier the storms, the percentage decreases in terms of reduction, but all storms would be reduce the discharge rate to the county system.
Okay, that will take into consideration. My question and concern is that right now, if it floods and you still take back 50%, we still may have flooding there in the future, but I guess that's our problem, not yours.
I'm sure the county is well aware of it, and when we start dealing with Monmouth County, if
So you
there's,
bring this up to the county?
well, they will bring it up to us most likely if there's a issue there, and they may require some improvements to that system that they want us to undertake.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the public?
Miss Curley, can I see that on the heels of what, I'm sorry, your name, sir?
Nick
Load,
Nick.
Nick. On the heels of what Mr. Loda just said, can I see that for a moment? Can I bother
Sure.
you?
Ma'am, you can come up.
Better you do that than I can do.
Oh, it's fine.
Thank you. Can you, no.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Is it possible instead of moving this over here like Mr. Higgins or
I'm
Matlick
thinking
said,
if
can we put it here?
If we green bank a bunch of spots, we could put it over here.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, we could put it
over here somewhere, away from everyone's property.
I think-
Could you attempt that when you
Yes.
show us the green bank spaces?
Yes, we will
Thank you.
attempt that as an option. We'll do 2 different plans. No problem.
Okay, if you can state your name and your address.
Diane Nagy, 11 Mallard Lane.
Okay.
Question regarding the UV parking spots, and I know you said that it's something that you need to do legally. What can you do to prevent people that are not church members using them? Are you going to put a fence around it that has a lock that church members then have a code to get into? What will prevent people from using them that are not supposed to be using them?
Again, when they're first installed, they're not EV stations. So there's nothing there for you to plug into. It's
Okay.
wiring under the ground.
Okay.
So
So you don't
What-
ever plan to make them?
Once they're operational,
Okay.
it could easily be something where they shut off the facility for the night, and the power to those are shut down too. So if somebody comes after the church has left and tries to charge their car, and it doesn't charge because it's not turned on.
Right, but they could come during the day and use it if they're not church members also. That's still,
Well,
people go back and forth on Saturday between all the shore people coming down, word of mouth, stop in the church, charge your car before you get on the parkway. So
Well-
what's to prevent those people from doing that?
You know what? It's more the church enforcing people using their facility if they're not members. So, I mean, obviously they don't want to have everybody from the shore stopping by to charge their cars on their way out of town. But if it happens
So there's
that,
no plan to put anything to prevent that?
that we didn't have a plan at this point, but when they do operational things and they see that if that's a problem for them, then they will have to address
It probably wouldn't be a problem for them. It would probably be a problem for the development and the people that live in the residential area that this is going into.
I would say it's a problem for them as well. They're paying for that electric.
Okay.
So it's not like the church is not making a profit on people coming and parking and charging their
So
vehicles.
I would like you to work with your client and bring that concern that we would
Absolutely.
like something to be done about preventing people that
We
are
can
not
simply
church
put
members.
signage up that says,
Yeah, that'll stop them. Okay.
Put signage, you can put cameras.
Mr.
You can
DeLomo
have
has a
deterrents in
question.
place.
Mr. DeLomo has a question.
Is it possible on the EV stations that they can just be operational during
that's what Mr. Anderson said.
church services?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's-
And when the church services are out, they're shut down.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. Yes.
They can also put card access on them too, like your typical
Yeah.
card swipe. They can
Exactly.
do that
Member of the
too.
church
You
can-
need a card in order to be able to use it.
Y'all, I own several EVs. No one's going to stop there to charge your car. It would take, you'd have to leave your car there probably 24 hours. When you can go a mile down the street to the supercharger, you can get it done in 30 minutes.
I'm sure you could put
infrastructure
cameras
yeah,
as
it's-
deterrents also. There's so many things we can put in place. as
Any other
deterrents.
questions from the public? Yes.
I've got to talk to Phil Murphy about this.
If you can state your name and your address.
Spot right now. I'm not going to plug into it. It's worthless.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Torsha. I live on 2801 Asbury Avenue, which is this property over here. So my property would pretty much my backyard would back up into the garbage area, which I just want to confirm that that's going to be moved, right? Did I understand that right?
No. So currently the garbage, we were asked to relocate it by Mr. Higgins from over here to over here. However, as a second option, we're going to propose to green bank some parking spaces, and we're going to look for a different location for the garbage to be decided with the intention to try to keep it away from neighbors.
Okay.
But that would be dependent on us getting relief from the board, green banking, and the traffic report, but we are happy to look into it.
Okay.
So,
Let-
continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Another concern of mine is the entrance, because that would be very close to our property line again. We do have a engraved entrance in that spot, and as of now, there is a lot of cars many times stopping in that area. My concern is that when they are coming to
Or
the
your
church,
question.
my question is, can that be moved? Because my concern is that people will come in and stop on our property, because the entrance is very close to our property.
Oh, that's been an ongoing topic tonight, whether we should keep it in that location, move it back to the middle, or someplace in between, where it still is a safe location. So I think we'll factor your concerns into those, and as we're discussing this with the board's professionals, we'll come up with the best recommendation.
Okay. And another question I have, do you know just what would be the maximum capacity for the church?
That question was asked earlier.
Different witness.
Okay, because that's also the same, it's a big concern. It's a high traffic area, and
You can
it's
ask that when that expert testifies. You can ask it then.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the public? Any other questions from the public? Yes, if you can come to the mic, state your name and your address.
Ms. Curley, you said there are how many seats though? Just
I believe-
could help this.
How many seats are there?
Sorry, 450 seats.
500.
Yeah, when you count
So here's the thing with the seats. So we have seats for parishioners and then seats for the choir. The parishioners that are sitting in the seats stand up and go to the choir. So it's not technically more people. It's just during the service, if I'm a choir member, I go and I change my seat because I sing through the services.
Yeah.
So
52.
So that's important
So-
to
so-
mention it so you can reduce the parking. Because right now your parking is based off of 502.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
but it's been brought up. This is the strictest interpretation of it. Sure.
Understood.
Yeah, and then
But-
so before we get to this young lady's questions, I did want to say that your ordinance requires a 10-foot wide parking space, and many municipalities allow 9-foot parking spaces. If there's any concern for impervious area, we can keep the same number of spaces and probably take 30 feet off the back of the property in terms of increased buffer that way. And 9-foot wide spaces are accepted almost universally everywhere in the state.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, that's a common request that we see at the board, and it's one that has been granted in the past. And in this particular case, that may be a viable option to reduce the amount of impervious surface if that is a concern.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can likely pull the parking areas back a little bit away from some of the property lines.
Could you show us a plan with that?
Yeah, so how about what I was thinking is that we could do 9x18 spots and then also show you some green bank parking based on whatever our traffic engineer comes up with parking demand. And that will probably show a very different gray area.
Can you do both?
We'll show both.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll show. We're gonna do 9x18. I think no matter what, because I think it's a very good thing to do.
I wasn't sorry.
So we're doing 9x18 with the plan as is with all the parking, and then 9x18 with green banked parking spaces. So you can see the different designs, and we are willing to work with your professionals on the board with that.
With that new plan, can you put the fence all around the property as we're discussing?
I think the fence is all around the property, but for areas where it would interfere with site triangles or distances with driving. Correct, Paul?
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is there's no detail of the fence, so we don't know what the fence is going to look
We
like.
will also provide a detail of the fence.
Which will not be a
Just to
chain
get
link.
back to the
Which will
parking.
not be chain linked.
Apparently, it will not be a chain link.
For the newer board members, both boards have traditionally granted a 9x18, 9-foot wide parking space when the applicant is providing additional landscaping above and beyond what the ordinance requires. So I don't have a problem with it. I don't think Ben does, and it's up to the board whether you do.
What's the current impervious calculation? What's required? What's provided?
We are pervious coverage. We are slightly over when you do the based on the buildable area. We're 76.7%
Okay.
on the buildable lot area.
And what is the limit? 75.
75.
Okay. So this would improve.
This would improve
Yes.
that.
It would eliminate that
It would be
variance.
compliant. Yeah. And in terms of it, the condition that they've approved other ones in the past where you add additional landscaping or you're beyond compliance, we don't comply, and I don't think the extra feet will get us to comply to the tree replacement ordinance. But I do still think that going to the 9-foot wide spaces is a good idea.
We'll get you there to the tree ordinance, don't worry.
Yeah, their impervious now is about 2,700 square feet over what would be permitted.
Okay.
So if they would get considerably below that.
Is permeable pavement considered impervious or pervious?
It's still considered impervious.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mr. Matlack and Mr. Higgins, would it help at all if there were a separate entrance and a separate exit for traffic flow at all, or that would not make a bit of difference?
We would have to hear from the
Traffic expert.
And also, we would have to look at the county. They are the ones who decide how many curb cuts occur on Asbury, not us and not this board. So we would have to look at the county regulations to see, because I know I'm Hudson County Planning Board attorney and we have restrictions. So we'd have to look into that.
Your traffic expert and
Our traffic expert will be able to opine on that.
Yeah, you should definitely hear his recommendation in terms of backup and safety and stuff in terms of the exit.
can you present it to him before you come back and get that
Yes.
perspective? Thank you.
The parking spots, are they based on the max capacity of the building? Is that how you come up with the calculation?
Yes.
Yes.
So, and I heard you say that there are like 50 duplicate seats. Is it possible to restrict the max seating capacity to what it's realistic? I don't know what the number is, but if you have 500 and you're telling me you're only going to use 450.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's either 450, which is in the out in the seating area, and then there's 52 on stage. For the choir to come out of the audience and up above. And yes, we can reduce that, but I believe technically we need relief because that wouldn't comply with the strict interpretation of your ordinance.
Well, you can restrict the capacity of the building to 450.
The parking calculation is based on the number of seats in the building.
Okay.
And the number of seats in the building is 502. So that requires one parking space for every 2 seats, requires 251 parking spaces. What they're saying is that only 450 seats are going to be used at any one time.
Right.
That would be their request, if they decide to make it, to ask for a variance to reduce the number of required parking spaces.
And I'd like to see it because that would reduce the parking even
Right.
further.
Yes, it would.
And I did speak with my client about removing the choir seats. It's just they have people in choir who are elderly and they need to sit in between the praise. So
Suggesting removing the seats, we're just saying you make a realistic calculation of the spaces.
Yeah, it's just part of a variance proof as opposed to, we have a conforming number of parking spaces now, so we would add additional relief. And
no one ever wants to go before a board for a parking variance.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have someone with a question. Can you state your name and your address?
Thank you. My name is Katie Buckley-Lovesek, and I live at 216 Cold Indian Springs Road. My question has to do, and I'm not sure if we talked about this. I'm sure there's going to be plans for security cameras around everywhere, and I guess I just have concerns about maybe being on camera in my own yard.
Okay, so it's really not in my area of expertise. It's either, in fact, I don't even know if it's in the architect would probably talk about it more, but it's really a tech expert that would probably be engaged in construction drawing elements to do cameras. But I'm sure they can keep it from spying on your property.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? Any other questions from the public?
Just as a point of clarification to revisit what we just said, are we reducing the number of spaces to conform with the 450? Can we just agree to do that?
No, that would, if the applicant wants to request a variance for parking, then they can do that.
We could also green bank spaces, which saves us the request for the variance, I believe.
We already agreed to green bank spaces,
Yeah.
but can you just
need to see
add
that.
another
I
variance?
guess the board could
Can Mr. Matlack finish his sentence? That would be great.
So, right now, the proposal is the 251 parking spaces. The applicant has said that they're going to go back and make some changes, including green banking parking spaces, and they may come back and ask for an additional variance for parking. At which point, you, the board, would have to decide if their reasoning for requesting that variance is valid. And we're almost hearing the testimony before the variance has been requested. But that we would have to go through this again if that variance request is.
Bring us a plan with the minimal impact with that parking lot.
Thank you.
Mr. Higgins, were you gonna?
Yeah, there seems to be a consensus of the board for them to calculate the parking based on 450 rather than 502.
And
And if you give them that direction, then they can do that on the plan.
I would also just say to the board that we still would need to hear from the traffic expert and hear about the operations of the building before we actually make a determination on granting any type of parking variance.
I think the cart is way over there, and we're still with the horse over here.
There's a picture of the
Seats are
horse behind
seats,
you.
And just because today folks get up and walk over to the other seats, that's one thing. But if the church is wildly successful, someday the choir will have to go to those seats in the first place to fill in all those other seats. So I think we need to.
We can limit the seating capacity.
Well, the seats are still gonna be in the church.
I think we should just wait to hear from testimonies. Okay.
We're kind of speculating a little bit right now, and I think we need to wait to see the plan, see what the revised plan is going to propose, and then hear the testimony from the traffic expert.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? Any other questions from the public? Last call. Any other questions from the public? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Okay, we began at 7:48 p.m. and it is now 9:43, so I would say, to be fair, to ensure that we have ample time for testimony as well as questions from the board and the public, that if Mr. Dooley, if I said that correctly, will come back
Yes.
instead of testifying tonight.
I think we should do a revised submission before Mr. Dooley and have Mr. Anderson walk you through that before we even get to architecture.
Okay.
The one question I do have, because we are revising plans, is do we have a consensus on the driveway? If
We did not vote on it.
I don't want to vote.
I would say if you could confer with Mr. Higgins and Mr. Matlack about board questions so that you're getting your information.
Thank you very, very much.
And before we close, I believe Mr. Gazarovski.
I've listened to the testimony, and obviously council has been eloquent talking about revisions at the end of the life. If there are going to be revisions, I would request that those revisions be completed prior to the next meeting and reviewed by your professionals prior to the coming back, so we could start with what you have before you rather than what will be in the future.
I would request maybe March or April, and we'll give an extension of time to act, and that will give us some time to get our ducks in a row. And I will renotice as well.
Okay.
If
So just to
there are
make
additional variances required as a result of these revisions, that you also notice.
I said I renoticed.
Okay. Just for the attorneys, I just want to make sure we will continue. They will renotice, and March 21st does not pose any problems for us with continuing.
I would love to say March 21st. It's my daughter's 9th birthday, so I cannot.
Okay. So that the next date.
That's a hard no. But
the
April,
next date would be April 18th.
That's a much better date.
Okay. And
Thank you.
It should be fine
I marked my hearing, and now we'll be here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the case will be continued to April 18th, 2024, and you will renotice.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Motion to close
I
the
thought I helped you.
public.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. And motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Aye.